Go ahead and hit record. Well, welcome everybody to today's masterclass, recognizing and redirecting self-sabotage behaviors of the successful silent sufferer. My name is Michelle Brigman. I'm a customer experience consulting and executive coach where I help leaders find purpose and happiness beyond their titles and create a more authentic experience of life. And I'm your host for today's session. Early in my career, I was on a business trip and I was traveling with the leadership team. And at that time, I was a frontline manager and I was laser locked on my career aspirations. I wanted to manage large teams. I wanted an executive title. And let's be honest, I wanted to make some bank. I wanted some money. And I was absolutely all in chasing success. Well, it was interesting because on that trip, I was getting more intimate exposure with the executives. And honestly, I just felt very privileged. And I also wanted to maximize the opportunity. So I did all those things that ambitious people do. I made sure that I was sitting up front because I wanted to get face time. Where I was able, I was asking them if they would meet with me and share their wisdom. I even had my elevator pitch down pat so I could share that. And I mean, things had been going really well in my career, and I could see my goals just gaining a lot more clarity, especially as I got to know one of the senior most executive women who was also on that trip. I mean, the fact of the matter is I wanted to be her and I wanted her life. And the more time I spent around her, the more I was believing that what she had was possible for me. So let me ask you this. If you have ever experienced seeing someone blazing a trail ahead of you, and just by seeing them, you found belief that you could also do something bigger, type trailblazer in the chat. Well, later that evening, while on that same trip, I woke up and I wasn't feeling really well. So I had headed down to the gift shop because I wanted to pick up something to make me feel better. And on the way back, I had to pass by the bar. And so, of course, I'm going to be nosy. And as I'm walking by the bar, I kind of glance in. And it was right then that I saw her, my role model. She was sitting alone, and it was late. She had a bottle of wine next to her, not a glass. She had a bottle. And I really didn't know anything about her life. I only knew what I saw her portraying at work. And she was kick-ass, powerful woman. She had it all together. And frankly, she was crushing it. But that night, I saw something else. I saw her, and the word I would describe it was despair. And I think it was that evening that this kind of light bulb sort of faintly went on. And it just raised my awareness really to the masks that we wear. I was gunning so hard for her life, yet I really didn't even know what that meant. And it made me wonder at the time if I was witnessing this anomaly of her, or if she represented what the life of many corporate senior executive women look like. Years passed by, and my career continued to progress upward. I started a family. I was thriving at work. And at that same time, my marriage was on the rocks. I was struggling as a working mom, and I was absolutely unsettled in my life. Now, nobody, of course, suspected that anything was wrong because I was wearing the mask of that kick-ass powerful woman that had it all together and was crushing it. And it was during a business trip after we kind of had all the planned social activities that one of the high-performing junior women leaders, she asked me if she could grab a glass of wine, which of course I said absolutely. And as we sat there, she gave me her elevator pitch. She asked me for advice. And she tells me that someday she wants to have my job. So how did I get there? And I remember that image of my role model flashing in my mind. And inside, I think I wanted to just have this meltdown, break down and cry, because I realized that in that moment, I had become her. I felt so alone. I was in despair. Kind of my world was falling apart personally, but everything was going really well at work. I didn't have a conversation, that honest conversation with the young manager at that moment. What I did instead is I encouraged her and I gifted her with some really great wisdom. And I want to ask you, have you ever mentored someone, and as you gave them this great advice, you realized that you could use a dose of your own wisdom? If so, type "do as I say" in the chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And looking back, I realized that there were signs that I was headed to this place of despair and burnout. I had the external signs of success, but I was operating on this empty happiness tank. I mean, on paper, I was successful. Inside, I was anything but. So, who am I, and what makes me someone who might have any wisdom to share with you today? So I spent over 2 decades as an executive leading award-winning strategies and programs and cultures for global iconic brands like Dell, Citi, 7-Eleven, Medallia. I've been recognized in the industry as a trailblazer in customer experience, IT, and innovation. I'm a champion for corporate DEI. However, I have also lived in the pits of burnout and found my way to the other side. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an executive lifestyle coach. I'm a podcaster. I'm a mom. I'm a friend. I'm a daughter. I am those same things that you are. Wearing all the masks, juggling all the things. And I created this masterclass because so many people have just been asking me, is it possible to avoid this downhill spiral? Because they see me today doing a lot of things and enjoying my life, and they are like, well, what's the secret? What do you know, Michelle? And my honest answer is I learned it the hard way, because I've been in the bottom of the pit. I felt desperate and alone, and I didn't like it. So over the last 6 years, not only have I learned how to just really reimagine and design my life so I can live in balance most of the time, but I've also helped coach many women to do the same. And I would say I help them do it faster and with less bumps and bruises than what I walked away with, just because they have someone helping them along the way. And as I talk to clients and colleagues and friends, depression, overwhelm, anxiety, it's like that's the new norm. And I was reading Deloitte's Women at Work study just recently, and over a third of working women are reporting that their mental well-being is very poor, and they say their stress levels are increasing. So if you feel like you're one of those 33% of the women that say their mental well-being is poor, just type me in the chat. And I mean, why wouldn't high-achieving corporate women feel this way? Because women by far carry the greatest responsibility for household tasks on top of working full-time. And they also report that they have a harder time just switching off. They don't know how to switch gears. Working from home only complicates that. So all of these other things can add up to over 20 hours more per week in household and caregiving duties beyond the greater than 40 hours that we're already putting in at work. And it was a couple of months ago where one of my clients, she was a new client, and she was meeting with me, and she said, I just feel like such a failure. And she is a very high achieving, successful woman, and I assure you she's the opposite of the failure. But she just couldn't see it because she has all this stuff swirling around her at work, with her family, with her friends. All of it just was suffocating her, and it caused her path forward to be hidden. And she felt so alone, like she was the only one experiencing this. And she made a comment to me. She's like, Michelle, like, everybody else seems to have it together. It's just me, right? Why can't I figure it out? And I'd say, no, she's not the only one experiencing this. She is, I would say that what she represented was one of the many limiting beliefs that women tell themselves. And in my work, just helping someone expose their limiting beliefs, these powerful, unconscious weights that can keep us trapped in a place of pain, and help them learn how to release their hold is, I don't, what's the word I want to use? I mean, it's like so gratifying to be a part of that and see it. And I think that that's maybe why I love the work that I do so much. I love working with these badass women who are suffering in silence, because their story is my story. And that's why I'm on a mission to stop the cycle of what I call the successful silent sufferer, those amazing, accomplished women that are in this downhill spiral of despair, because I want to help them avoid falling into that pit of self-betrayal, burnout, and unhappiness. So what does a successful sufferer look like? And I would say this is what she looks like in my experience. Number one, she is confident. So she gives off this air of authority and confidence. I mean, you see her and you're like, and she knows what she is doing. And have you ever heard that saying of, if you've got a problem, you want to give it to, if you've got work to be done, you want to give it to a busy person because they can figure out how to get it done? I mean, she epitomizes that. They're gritty. They're resilient. They can handle pressure. I mean, you see them thriving whenever everything's kind of in chaos. Confident. Second thing I see is she is the go-to person, because no matter what, she seems like she can basically solve any problem that anyone brings at her, whether they're coming to her with a career, a project, business related, personal. People will seek her out because she listens, she wants to understand, and she's able to clear out the noise and see a path forward and through. And she also has proven, repeated results under her belt. She gets it done, which leads me to the third quality, and that is, I'm going to call it accomplished. She's recognized for her work. So whether it could be promotions, awards, but she's always receiving accolades for what she's doing. And, you know, it's like, if I'm thinking of the word winner, this person is the one that you see show up in your mind, right? They just, no matter what, they seem to always come out winning. The next thing that I see with the successful silent sufferer is, people may call her Superwoman, because, right, she's able to juggle all these things, and somehow it looks like she's keeping all the balls in the air, and she seems to be doing it well. I remember I was managing a team, a customer service team, and I remember my team bought me for Boss's Day or something, they bought me this Wonder Woman robe. And I remember I was so proud of it, right? Because, I mean, it just meant that I was doing a really good job of wearing all the masks. That was also the same time I mentioned earlier where my whole kind of personal life was falling apart. But man, I was showing up as Superwoman at work, and everybody thought that. So that was the sign of like, you're pulling it off, Michelle. Successful, but I was suffering in silence. Now, on top of this, kind of the dark side that people may not know because they see her, right, portraying Wonder Woman, is she has fractured relationships. So maybe her, like in my case, marriage is falling apart. Maybe she's struggling with her relationship with her kids. Maybe she's not present, but it's affecting those relationships that are the closest to her because of her ability not to be fully present, or she's too exhausted. She's given it all at work. So when she comes home, they're the ones hurting. And she knows it and she feels guilty. So then you've got, she could be being treated for anxiety or depression, right? So now she's figuring out, all right, how do I How do I deal with these feelings? And sometimes what happens next is in those feelings result in her turning to unhealthy coping behaviors. So 7 might be, my example of my mentor, she had that big bottle of wine sitting there next to her. She turned to alcohol. Mine was always emotional eating. Like I'd just start eating a bunch of crap, right? That was my way when I'd get all anxious. But there's something that's coping in an unhealthy way. And then inside just really the deepest corners of her soul, she starts questioning like her purpose. So wanting to know, like, is this it? So she's questioning her purpose, which is leading her down this very negative mindset and slippery slope. And then finally, I would say she is feeling alone and trapped. I realize. So it says alone and trapped, right? And she doesn't see a way out because everything feels really risky. Maybe she's the breadwinner. There's financial responsibility on her to support the lifestyle. So she can't just throw up her hands and walk away. She's got the sense of security, right? Because I've got the predictable paycheck. So I feel alone. I don't know a way out because what the heck am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just walk away from it all? Well, I can't do that. I'm trapped in this place. And I guess this is just the way my life is going to be from here on. And that's what I hear. There's this hopelessness. So if this resonates with you or reminds you of someone you know, I would say type SSS, successful silent sufferer, in the chat. Because it's a familiar feeling. Now, while these are kind of the common signs of the successful silent sufferer, what she really wants to be is a brave, balanced badass. She wants to do work she loves. She wants to be recognized and rewarded for that work. And she wants to live a fulfilled life that's full of joy and experiences that prioritize herself, which she's never done, and the people and things most important to her. Because I know this, when women are operating from a place of self-love and balance, man, they can have such a positive impact on the world around them. So today's masterclass is about recognizing, redirecting those self-sabotage behaviors of that successful silent sufferer. So what is the first self-sabotage behavior? It's being too agreeable. All right, too agreeable. Women love to help. We were raised to be helpful. When work asks you to stay late and finish a project, even though you've committed to cooking dinner for the family that night, you say yes. When your teen asks you to drive them to a friend's house, even though you've got to drop everything you prioritize for yourself, you say yes. How about this one? When your hairstylist cuts your bangs too short, not speaking from personal experience, but let's say your hairstylist cuts your bangs too short. She asks you if you love it. You're like, yes, I love it. Although you hate it, right? But women have been socialized that being seen as likable is the standard of good, whether it's a good wife, mother, leader, boss, friend. Like, this is what's good. You're agreeable. In fact, we are expected and taught to put the needs of others ahead of ourselves. And for so many women, even the most accomplished ones, it's still hard for them to say no. Because when we do, it typically comes with these feelings of guilt or selfishness. And if I go back to my comments about limiting beliefs, I grew up believing that if I said no and the other person got angry or sad, it was my fault. One of my limiting beliefs was that I could control someone else's feelings. So I did my best to please them, and I do whatever they needed me to do, even if I didn't want to. Saying yes when you want to say no and being too agreeable is stealing from you. It steals your sense of agency, your self-worth, your energy, and your happiness, and it leaves you with an empty tank where you feel depleted. You are not honoring yourself because you aren't creating and protecting healthy boundaries. And when we agree to everything, we give away our most precious resource, and that's our time. Our time is finite. So think about how you use your time during the day. Are you making a withdrawal, meaning time is going out with a little benefit to you overall? If you've agreed to do something out of a sense of obligation or fear or being judged, and you have said yes when you really don't want to do what you're doing, you're self-sabotaging yourself. Maybe you said yes to that client meeting that conflicted with your family without even trying to find an alternate time because you didn't want to be perceived as sending a signal that the client wasn't number one. Yet, you were more comfortable sending the message to your kids and family that you could miss dinner. So if you said yes to things that you've wanted to say no to, type yes in the chat. And I am going to ask you to think about your day. How much time are you spending making an investment with your time, meaning your time has a positive personal ROI? You're pouring yourself into things that matter to you and bring you joy. Maybe it's cuddling on the couch. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's a date night with yourself or with someone special. Maybe it's volunteering or mentoring to be of service for something you care deeply about. Or it could be working on a cool new project, a passion project at work. But giving away our time in a way that has a negative ROI drains us. So to counter the self-sabotage behavior of being too agreeable, be intentional with your time. Be intentional with your time. How are you spending it? Are you making an investment or a withdrawal with negative ROI? And just another way to counter the self-sabotage behavior of being too agreeable is knowing your values, because this will help you from being too agreeable. So what are values? These are the beliefs that determine what we actually do. So examples of values may be honesty, compassion, stability. You know, one of my values is integrity. If I say I'm going to do something, I want everyone to trust that I'm going to do it. When someone else tells me they're going to do something, I want to trust that they're going to do it as well. So I'm going to share a little story about how the intersection of being too agreeable and my value of integrity put me on this path of successful silent sufferer. So one morning before work, I asked my family about making dinner together that night. I said I'd grill if my son would pick up some stuff from the store and my daughter would be in charge of dessert. So we had our plan. Now, that same week, my boss had been in town and we had talked about getting together with a client at some point, but there just had been no formal plans made. I did say yes, that would be fine. Look forward to getting there with the client. All was well. Well, mid-afternoon, this particular day, my boss calls and he says, "Hey, I made reservations for us tonight with this client at 6. Okay, so I'm committed to my family that night for dinner. I mean, we all have our plan. But I also had committed to my boss and the client. So the successful silent sufferer version of me would have said nothing to my boss because I had already, in my mind, I would say, well, I've already agreed that I was going. And I mean, my job is my stability and security, which are both two other values that are high on my value system. And I would have, frankly, bailed on my kids because it was easier for me to disappoint them. Now, these are the most important people in my life, but it was easier for me to disappoint them than it was my boss because the lie I would tell myself was, well, my kids have to forgive me. Or maybe I would say to myself that I'm doing this because I'm providing for them and I'm making our lives better. Now, think about what I just said. Integrity is a strong value. But my actions of not living with integrity with my family was being sacrificed. Now, if I think down the road, which sacrifice would have cost more in the relationship? Taking away from my boss or taking away from my family? Hands down, my family was going to suffer more. And I know this because this is how I was living when I was living as that successful silent sufferer. And my kids would tell you that they felt like they were second runner up because the work trip, the work event, the missed activity, the scrolling on my phone, checking email, and taking the client calls at night when all they did was they just wanted my attention. But my focus was going there. I wasn't present with them. Now, let's take that same situation and let's think about, what does that brave, balanced, badass version of me do? Well, I did agree to join my boss and client for dinner that week. However, since he's waiting until last minute and asks me, maybe I pause and I think about this decision based on my value system. Because my value system is this filter, and it allows me to use it as kind of a funnel to go, okay, filter, is this aligned to values or not aligned to values? And it makes it a lot easier for me to say yes and no. But in my example, I had told my boss yes that I would go out to dinner at some point that week, and I did want to honor that. However, he threw this like last minute plan on me. So my brave, balanced, badass response might be, hey, this is late notice and I have another commitment tonight, but Wednesday or Thursday would work for me. Now, I don't need to feel guilty. I don't need to have this feeling of I'm being selfish. I've offered alternatives because ultimately he's the one that committed me without having a conversation in the final planning. So that's on him, not me. Old me, silent sufferer, would have felt responsible. Oh, I'm the inconvenience. I've got to swoop in to clean up his mess. But now I'm more than happy to suggest alternatives to him to solve it. So by knowing your values and honoring your time and commitments to those most important to you will help you redirect your successful self-sabotage behaviors. So knowing values. Whenever I work with clients to help identify their values, they're really equipped to keep their power because it makes it easier to filter their decisions based on how can they live in alignment with the brave, balanced, badass woman they want to be. All right, what's the next self-sabotage behavior of the successful silent sufferer? Conforming. I'll try to keep this where you all can see it. So conforming. This is when you behave in a way that is culturally acceptable, but inauthentic. So I remember a time when I was working for a company and I was invited to meetings held at another out-of-state location. And I remember walking through the halls and I was struck by the fact that people, they didn't make eye contact. They didn't speak to one another. This was like the polar opposite of the site where I work. So in the beginning of the week when I was there, I'm like, I'm going to buck the norm and I'm going to say hi to people. I'm going to smile. And I was 100% met with resistance and awkwardness. And I noticed that by the end of the week, I had conformed to the culture and I started acting like everybody else. I was going about my own business, even though this was not authentic to me. So without even realizing it, I had absolutely abandoned my true nature. And instead, I was just, go along to get along. I was like going along to get along. I found that every time in the future when I went to this site, I could just feel my energy shift to this sort of negative direction because I intuitively knew that I was going to be putting on a mask when I walked in those doors so I could better fit in. Now, we are individuals who are more often than not, without even realizing it, we align our beliefs and behaviors to those we are around. We observe who's successful in this environment, and then we mimic those behaviors. And in a lot of ways, this is really good for us. I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, it has helped us to survive. But what I'm talking about today is when conformity is causing you to live inauthentically, and it's having a negative impact on your overall well-being. In my opening example, that scenario, it only happened a few times a year that I went to this site. But what about the ways we conform daily that are like a slow drip in the wrong direction? Have you had to hide parts of yourself to feel like you could be better accepted? If so, type conform in the chat. I have another story. I was working on a role where my team and me, when we were thriving, morale was great, performance was great. I got a new boss. And she came in with a very different style. And rather than appreciating the synergy and power that was possible from our different styles, like she just wanted me to conform to her preference. So at that time, my team held these monthly self-development workshops where we would share skills and hobbies just with anybody that wanted to show up to increase wellness. So example might be once a month, we might have one of the members of the team come in and they wanted to talk about what meal planning. Another month it might be, hey, we're going to teach a yoga class. I mean, it was all optional and available to anybody that was interested. But the team loved these workshops. And frankly, I loved finding ways to create space where they could bring their full selves to work. So this new boss comes in and demands that we stop it because, I mean, obviously I'm keeping people from doing their jobs. Now, my leadership style is all about having fun and delivering awesome results. So when she put her foot down on creativity, man, I was pissed off and I wanted to dig my feet in, and I just felt like my hands were being tied behind my back. And because I was so ticked off, work just stopped being fun. Now, I need you to know that the team, even though we were doing all these cool workshops, their outcomes, they were always meeting targets. But I was in full-blown silent suffering because I felt like I had to hide this true part of myself. So your countermeasure for conformity is authenticity. You got to show up authentically and seek out opportunities that allow you to do so. So in that scenario, I recognized that I had an opportunity to approach my boss with a win-win proposal, but I had to take the time to understand what her priorities and values were. And then I was able to meet her where she was in a way that respected her desire, but also honored my authentic self and leadership style. And through that conversation, we were able to really respect each other's intentions and management styles. So I was able to show up as that brave, balanced badass, able to address my boss's concerns, and then find a way to effectively collaborate on how work could be done. And in the end, we kept the workshops. The team went back to thriving. I loved my work again. My boss was happy. The team was happy. I didn't have to compromise my authentic self to conform, and I enabled everybody to win. So when you find yourself conforming in a way that it just doesn't feel right in your gut, then you have to do some self-discovery work and uncover why. This is how you get acquainted with your authentic self. So what does authenticity look like for you? All right, my third one, this is my last self-sabotage behavior for today. 30 is doing it alone. Okay, when I was talking about the first self-sabotage behavior being too agreeable, I mentioned that most women naturally love to help, yet one of our limiting beliefs is that we're burdening someone else when we ask for help, or that it's weak to ask for help. And heaven knows, if we're that superwoman, we can't show any cracks. But isn't it funny how to feel validated and awesome, or how I would say how we feel really validated and awesome whenever someone asks us for help and we feel like, okay, I showed up and I was able to solve the problem. Yet we often feel exactly the opposite when we ourselves need help. If asking for help feels uncomfortable to you, type "it's hard" in the chat. So when it comes to keeping ourselves isolated and trying to solve our problem alone, we are setting ourselves up for failure. The reason is your lived experiences, beliefs, and values have gotten you to this point that you are today. And in many aspects, that has served you so well. It has helped you survive and thrive. However, if you are here today resonating as a successful silent sufferer, let's just acknowledge that those same lived experiences, beliefs, and values that have helped you survive have also led you to this place that you don't want to be. This place has you teetering on burnout and despair, or maybe you're already in this pit. You have been trying to change things, but it isn't working. And the reason it isn't working is because your toolkit does not have the right tools in it. If it did, you would be in a better place. And I mean, think about a time in your career when you wanted a promotion to a higher level position, or you wanted to shift to a new assignment. You didn't go ask your unemployed uncle for career advice. You didn't just say, oh, I think be a managing director, a VP, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, when you had no lived experiences of being a successful managing director, VP, or CEO of a Fortune 500 company. What did you do? You sought out support. You read books. You did research. You learned from someone who had wisdom and secrets to help guide you along your own path towards greater success, right? So if you've leaned on the lived experiences of another to help you navigate your own situation, type support in the chat. It is natural to seek out the wisdom and advice from someone further along than we are to help guide our path. We do that because we know they have skills and information that we don't. They've been there before us, and they can save us a lot of bumps and bruises. And I work with so many women who have neglected to build their support system, and they find they're in a situation where they need guidance, yet they start looking around and like nobody or few people are even in their circle. And the ones that are often in their circle are men. And while that is awesome, and I have had some of the best support in my career have been from men, there is also a unique perspective and understanding that comes from female support, especially from women who have been living life trying to juggle it all, wearing the masks of Superwoman and feeling unhappy, guilty, tired, angered, frustrated, and unfulfilled. There is something powerful and encouraging and hopeful about having a support system of other women who are on the journey alongside you. So, create your support system. So create your support system and stop trying to go it alone. You know, I mentioned earlier that I want to wipe out successful silent suffering, and I'm on this mission to like unleash the awesomeness of these women and create a world of brave, balanced badasses who love their work, live a fabulous life filled with people, things, and experiences most important to them. And from my own personal experiences as a successful executive and a coach, I've created what I call my circle framework to support this transformation. All right, so what's the circle framework? See, connect. This is about connecting and getting reacquainted with your spirit. The reality is you haven't been paying attention probably to her in a very long time, or the last time you did was 2 decades ago, or when you graduated college and you were trying to figure out your life plan, and then you just kind of hit autopilot. So the circle starts with you. It starts with connecting and reacquainting with your spirit. The next step is I, and this is identify. You want to identify where you're out of balance. You know, you can't make a change if it's kind of like the directions, right? You can't reach your destination if you don't know where you are. So this is about understanding where you are. So you've reconnected with your spirit. You're like, okay, kind of what's going on? Where are things out of balance? And you do this without judgment. You do this just to be curious and understand. The R is recognize. Recognizing how self-sabotage is showing up in your life. What are the things that you are doing that are contributing to this fact that you're out of balance? So that you can create a refreshed vision of personal success. One that's based on where you are today and who you are today. You're a very different person than when you were probably the last time you even thought about your own personal goals and successes. L is learn. This is about learning and aligning new beliefs, practices, and behaviors. The things you do today, if I want to be a best-selling author, but I never write, then I don't have the right practices and behaviors in place. So it's about understanding to make sure learning what you do is getting you the right steps to get there. It's kind of like goals at work, right? If you're going to achieve a 20% increase in revenue, well, you've got to look at something different with sales. So what are my behaviors? And then finally, The E is about embracing and embodying your fabulous life. You've reconnected with who you are, you've put the right steps in place, and now you're being that person. You are becoming, you are present, and you're able to enjoy this. This system is very powerful in helping you move from where you are to where you want to be. So today's conversation around recognizing self-sabotage behaviors of the successful silent sufferer is an important awareness step. Perhaps it's turning a light on in unintentional ways that you're hurting your own self, your own sense of balance and wellness. Because as I said, it is an important step because you can't change what you can't see. So you may be at a crossroads. Do you want to design your life to be a brave, balanced badass? Because you do have a choice. You can choose to stay the course. I mean, it's comfortable and it's predictable. And goodness knows we like staying with what we know. But I encourage you to ask yourself, by staying the course, what does my life look like 1 year from now? Will I be happy that I'm perceived as a confident, respected superwoman on the outside who is tired, depressed, hopeless, and losing connection with those people and things that are most important to you? Or would you like to be a brave, balanced badass who is supported on her journey with proven methods and a support system that stops the pain now and opens you up to create and receive joy and fulfillment in abundance? Because if you want to be number two, I personally invite you to set up some time with me. It is a free, it's no pressure, it's a conversation to talk about how successful silent suffering is showing up for you. I want to help you identify your biggest pain points and how they're impacting your life right now. And finally, we can collaborate on some next steps to turn things around so you feel like you're headed in the right direction and thriving. If having a personal conversation is appealing to you, type personal plan in the chat. I'm actually going to share a link to set up time with me in the chat. And I just want to share something else that has helped me on my own journey. And as I've looked at kind of all my career successes, I've walked into some ambiguous, scary situations and challenges that I had to move across the finish line. And I mean, there were many times I had freaking no idea how I was going to pull it off, but I did. I have transformed how companies do business. I've transformed company cultures. I have transformed teams. I did that. I did that through grit, resilience, and the right support system. And years ago, when I looked at the place where I was and the pain I was in, I knew that I had to tackle myself in the same way. I know how hard I work. I know how to surround myself with the right people to help me be successful. I know how smart and resourceful I am. And I know I can do anything I set my mind to, even if it's uncomfortable. And it was time that I bet on me, to bet on me and trust that I will once again achieve success, because this is the most important work that I'll ever do. It is the success for my whole life and everything and everyone I touch. And I invite you to think about your journey, because I'm pretty confident you could say the same thing. I am pretty confident you have been through these ambiguous, hard things, personally and professionally, and you were able to muster up the strength to figure it out. I know that you are unstoppable, and I would love to help support you as you find you're brave and you create the fabulous life that you love. So as we're closing, I just want to recap the 3 symptoms of successful silent sufferers and how to redirect them. So number 1, being too agreeable. Being too agreeable. So consider the ROI of your time. Be mindful of what's an investment and what's a drain. Number 2, conforming. Where in your life are you showing up inauthentically? Because here you want to use your values to help you show up authentically. That's going to make a big difference in your overall happiness. And then number 3, doing it alone. You've got to have a support system of people who have the skills and experiences to help you elevate what you already have, so that you can make your way to where you want to go faster and have a whole lot of slots, a whole lot less bumps and bruises. This recipe can help you get to where you want to go. Now, I'd love to take a few questions if you have any questions in the chat.
Hi, Michelle. This is Renee. I have a quick question. So you mentioned earlier in the meeting about like kind of admiring the trailblazer from before, and it seemed like you were admiring them from afar, but did you ever, or have you ever approached one of the trailblazers or women that had an influence in your career? Because I have noticed in my specific examples that when I do, a lot of the fear just goes away organically because they're so helpful in paying it forward from maybe somebody that took the time to chat with them in their journey. So I'm just curious on how some of those conversations have went when you approach them, and if they ever disclose their silent suffering.
So I think for the most part, no, they haven't. I think there's been a few exceptions of people. I mean, as I've gotten at a different place in my career and I was on a peer level, I would say yes. But I would tell you in my experience, and then what I hear from different people that I mentor or coach, is if they're asking someone senior to them, it's very rare that I know or they have experienced the full vulnerability of what it's really like and some of the trade-offs. I think that, I mean, Renee, I think that's a beautiful thing if you are able to build the kind of the trust and rapport over time where you're able to get some the truth that I'll call the reallys from your mentors to help you figure out, all right, well, how do I learn from that and have a better place that I end up to in my own journey, because they're willing to share some of that wisdom. And I'll also add on to that, I have the podcast like Hard Won Wisdom, and part of that is these women have been really vulnerable with their story, but it's always the women who are at the pinnacle of their career, and then they're willing to talk about it. It's just been very hard for us to have someone right in the middle of it to really say what's true and what they're struggling with, because they don't want to expose the cracks. So I think that's a relationship that you're very lucky, and I'd let them know how much you appreciate that. And thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Well, I know we're about out of time, so I just want to say thank you for joining today's masterclass. And remember, I just extend the invitation that I'd love to have a no pressure conversation with you if I might be able to help you move forward in a better direction. Let's stop being successful silent sufferers, and let's all be brave, balanced badasses. Thank you so much, and have an amazing day.